Hey, so this is Daniel here. Before you enjoy this episode, um, we just wanted to acknowledge that this is being recorded during the WGA SAG-AFTRA strike. We are not influencers in the sense that we do not have any relationship with any studios. We are not being paid to talk about this. We are just two enthusiastic friends providing critical analysis of media that we really like. But we do want to make it clear in no uncertain terms that we do stand with WGA SAG-AFTRA. We are standing in solidarity. We believe that they are making very reasonable requests. If you listen to our shows, you know that we are already on that side of um, moving more towards socialism anyway, and making sure that people are aware of the ills of capitalism. I understand the paradoxical nature of um, enjoying things from these huge companies, but you'll hear anytime we notice them speaking to our more left leaning values, and we are definitely excited seeing actors start to speak about some of our values as well in terms of trying to take back the means of production and making things a bit more equal, and not just talking about money, but as I said, making sure that they have more autonomy and not being scanned for AI so that they have even less control of their tools to work. So yeah, this is an ever-changing situation, I believe. We've heard a lot of different things about what's okay and what's not okay, but we firmly believe that without the labor of the writers and actors who are currently on strike, the stuff that we like would not happen. So if we find out that this is something we shouldn't be doing anymore, we will stop right away. But for now, we will continue to voice our opinions on these works, obviously without any incentive from studios, because we are not working with them. We do not want to have a relationship with them at this point, because they are rejecting very reasonable demands from WGA and SAG-AFTRA. All right, thank you very much and enjoy the episode.
Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF everything in that shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF everything. Spoiled rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome back, everyone.
Hey, hey, hey.
It's me, Daniel,
And this is Ben
on Spoiled Rotten.
on that shelf.
Well, boom. Almost forgot to say that. We are here to discuss Blue Beetle. This is like the last movie before James Gunn takes over in earnest and actually starts making movies.
Yeah, or or the kickoff, as some people are debating.
No,
Or if there's not much of debate, but
I'm not debating.
do you feel like
It's
this is the closeout, or do you feel like this is just
It's
ambiguous
nothing.
enough
It's just a
to
movie
be like,
that came out.
okay,
Yeah, it's a movie.
it's a movie. It's there.
I,
There it is.
I think the strength of this movie is that it's not interested in you thinking any deeper than what you're looking at on the screen.
It definitely doesn't try to do that.
No,
It's just like, no,
I-
here's
I'm
what we
not
want
saying
you to
it's-
focus on.
I don't think it's failing at anything. I think it's like, we're gonna do a fun, like, throwback, like, superhero movie.
Yeah.
This is building Jaime Reyes's world, but it's not trying to like be in service to anything else or build out
No.
anything other than Jaime Reyes's world.
Yeah, and it's not trying to give like an Easter egg or clue that indicates that this is a totally like nothing like that. It's just like, okay, it's very ambiguous. Palmyra City is where it occurs, and I like the theme of a lot of what they bring up in this kind of thing. But my question, and I heard conflicting kind of things, and obviously I want to ask, is Palmyra like a new city just for this movie, or just relatively new within the next few, like last few years? Because I know some of the characters were relatively new, but kind of rewritten a little bit, like Victoria Court or something like that.
Yeah,
But yeah,
I don't know anything about Blue Beetle other than I know like in Young Justice, he's just
Mhm.
from El Paso. I know in this they live on El Paso Street, but
Right.
he's just from El Paso in Young Justice.
Mhm.
And I think whatever iteration in the comics they are with Jaime, I think it's Palmera City. I think
Mm.
because they're adapting a very specific comic line
Right.
for this movie.
Right. Which is
Um,
which is
well,
very, for me, I grounded, relatable, and understandable. Like right off the bat, I'm like, I'm connecting with this guy.
I was gonna ask you
He's
about that, but before
Yeah.
that, I guess the point of the movie, the general idea of the movie is Jaime Reyes comes home from graduating from Gotham City New pre-law, and
Pre-law, yeah.
he needs a job for reasons that aren't really connected to how the movie plays out, but he needs a job,
Yep.
and well, his family is losing their home. They set a 3 month thing on that, which didn't really factor in by the end. But anyway,
It really didn't have a
yeah. So
factor.
they're losing his family is losing their home in 3 months. He needs a job. He runs into Jenny Cord, the daughter of Ted Cord, the second
Mhm.
Blue Beetle,
Mhm.
and she, for no
She's
real
got
reason,
her
just
agenda.
gives him the scarab Kajida, and they merge, and he is Blue Beetle. And the
Well,
movie is mostly him trying to not be captured by uh, Victoria Cord, who you mentioned earlier, who is Ted
yes.
Cord's sister.
Mhm.
And there's Carapax, this
I
general guy,
can't
this
pronounce his
lieutenant
name.
guy who kind of starts the
For
movie and is probably anyway. I
he's
won't get too much into my opinions, but anyway, yeah,
yeah.
he's being hunted down because they need the scarab to finish their
Mhm.
OMAC program.
Mhm.
Um,
To copy the AI,
yeah,
basically.
they wanna well, I mean, that's the thing. It's not AI because it's just a
It
being
is,
from it's an
yeah.
alien being. So
Yes,
I mean,
entirely.
you're not. I don't blame you for saying that because the movie treats it like it's AI, but it isn't. It is a alien being.
But
Uh,
it's because the Victorian Court's like, we're going to take the AI from this. So
no, that's what I'm
I
saying. The
guess
movie
they're
treats it that
taking
way, but
exactly.
that's not what's
It's
happening.
supposed to be a separate character altogether, and I
Yeah,
like that aspect of it because it comes into play at a very pivotal part, which I really, really do like. Which I'm like,
yeah,
oh, I get this character much better now. I like it a lot.
yeah.
Um,
So
in
the
Yeah,
that's
it's
the
just
movie.
taking the
It's like it's
weaponized aspect from it, I guess, the AI weaponized aspect from this suit. So you're right, that's the movie.
the
That's the
movie.
whole
Yeah,
premise.
he really does not want to get captured, and his family
Yep.
gets caught up into it, and that is an
Hmm.
issue. Um, so you said you connected with Jaime Reyes. I did not. I did not. I
Really?
didn't. I don't think this movie
Mm.
is even interested in or doing a good job of actually making Jaime Reyes a character that you like think about outside of what's happening on the screen at any given moment. Like, I don't even think you go inside of his room to get a sense of like there's always scenes, and like this is the last time I'll bring up Marvel as a comparison, but like there's scenes in Across the Universe, Into the Universe, or Into the Spider Verse, Across the Spider Verse, all of the Far From Home, Homecoming, where you're like in your lead character's room and you can look and see what their influences are, and maybe that's
Mhm.
why Peter Parker references, "Hey, we should
Mhm.
do that thing from Empire Strikes Back," because you know that kid likes Star Wars and stuff.
Mhm.
So when Jaime Reyes is like, "Look at this," like I'm assuming like anime inspired sword comes out. I'm like, I don't like, okay, sure. I don't know why he thought of that. I don't know what about him would be interested in that. I
Mhm.
don't even really think he wants to be a hero the way the other characters I talked about were. He is really like that first section of the movie is really like, okay, I would watch this if it was like a comedic drama about this
Mhm.
family that needs to save their house.
Mhm.
I was actually scared when I was like, I mean, I know they have to be a superhero at some point, but like that's not really the path we're on here, because I don't know
Sure.
how him being a superhero fixes or solves any like or incorporate like
Oh,
yeah,
none of it does.
it's not weaved in, right? Like we always
Right.
talk about what is this movie trying to get at, and how if it's done well, all of that stuff comes together, and so that every scene you're dealing with is exploring that, interrogating that. But the
Right.
movie is kind of like, oh yeah, like he needs a job, so that's how he's going to see Jenny Cord.
Mm.
She needs to hide the scarab, so that's why she's going to give it to him. But it's like there's all this mythology of like, oh, it needs to pick you. And since we don't really spend any time with Jaime, like we spend time with his family. I like his family, and I'm not even saying I don't like Jaime's performance. I'm saying I don't know him. I know his other family members better than I know him. I know what makes his Uncle Rudy tick. I know what like his grandmother is into. I know what like his sister, his father, his mom less so, but I know the majority of his family. Like they do,
Right.
they invest time in like getting it. Like I was kind of annoyed with George Lopez at first, but by the end of it, I was like, no, like he truly won me over. He's doing a really good job of making this a full-fledged character.
He shines out in this movie for sure,
Yes.
which I didn't expect.
No, I did not. I expected to just be annoyed by him, but
I agree.
He has moments of self-reflection. He has moments of truly being the heart of the moments he's in. Like, I think that what didn't work for me in this movie was the fact that I don't really feel connected to Jaime Reyes. I know he's the hero. I know he's the protagonist, but the movie isn't really inviting me into him. I'm invited to meet his family, and I love his family, but I don't think, like, even moments where the villain is like, yes, that's why your love for your family is your weakness. I'm like, what are you bringing that up for right now? Nothing about this moment has anything to do with his family necessarily.
That
like,
was
that's
forced,
the
100%.
The second time he says it, not the first time. I mean, the first time I was like, whatever, they got to get it off. But it was more like the second time I was like, this really doesn't have anything to do with this. Well, he's like, I told you your love for it. I was like, I mean, you were always going to capture him. So it's not even like, it's not even like, oh, they captured his family and his love for his family made him go get it. It's like, no, you were always after him. You were always planning to be standing over him to kill him. Like that was always the case. So again, it's not truly tied into the beats of the story. It's just beats of a story that are happening.
I completely agree with a lot of coincidental things that you're pointing out within this movie. Like that, there's a lot of dialogue there. That's like, I'm like, for you to point that out one time in the beginning, you're like, okay, that I see how that factors into this, but I also, why are you giving people critical feedback based on what you're seeing them fail at? Like, don't. Unless you're like one of those guys that's like MJ, where you're like, no, I want you to be at your best. So when I beat you, you know you'll never be able to beat me. And it's not that, because there's no other thing other than him being like your weaknesses. And then later on at the very, which I'm not going to talk about right now because I know I want to talk about it in depth.
Well, yeah,
but
that's
later
what I was
on,
going to bring up the other thing that didn't work for me, which is
and it pulls back all this other stuff that you're like, oh, now I have to look at his character all differently from the beginning, which I did, and I'm like,
just
okay,
have that be part of the movie. I'm not going to reference another Marvel movie, but there is a very good example of a movie that came out in 2018 where you are looking at two people going through something that are having similar experiences and get similar powers by the end of it, but you were in on both of their points of views and how them coming together informs each other and progresses the movie instead of keeping it a secret until the end. Especially if you're going to start the movie on that locket with that character, the villain. And just be like, well, he's important, obviously, but we're not really that interested in digging deeper until we need to at the end.
I get what you're saying, especially in the My Wash stuff. It doesn't work so well effectively here, where they chose to drop the thing. It's just like, oh, okay, this is what it's. I wish we kind of knew that going in a little bit more, but I will say that the reason why it worked for me, Jaime, I will say this, and I understand why it didn't work for you. For me, Jaime's character, you're right to point out that there's a differentiation in how these characters are presented, both in the visual storytelling aspect of it. And I thought everything that we saw about Jaime when we first meet him tells us everything that we need to know, is that he's not proud of where he comes from, is that he's expecting more, and he's only presenting the aspects of him that he wants us to see, which is basically his insincerity. It's his disconnection with his family, all this kind of stuff. He complains about it when he does get that job, right? Which is handed to him through nepotism. He just gets it and he's like, immediately, I'm not going to cherish this whatsoever. I'm going to immediately break out. I'm going to, do bigger things. I'm going to daydream, right? He's in that state of daydreaming. He wanted to be more. He expected more. And he's like, oh man, my family's pulling me back. Like,
I disagree completely. I
But
think that's the problem with the movie is that you've mapped that onto him, but nothing about the movie. Like when the whole thing is he's coming home from graduating, and his family's like, "Don't tell him the bad news. It's going to make him feel bad." And that only makes sense if he is someone connected to his family and who cares about his family and doesn't feel dragged down by them. Because as soon as he hears the bad news, which is, "Hey, we're gonna lose the house in 3 months," his reaction isn't like, "Oh my god," you've seen this beat in many shows and movies of like,
Mhm.
I guess I gotta stay. But his whole thing was, "Why didn't you say something earlier? I could have been here. I could have come back." Like
Yeah.
nothing about that seems like, "Oh, I don't want to be connected to this."
Well,
And
he wanted to pull everyone out. So he basically,
yeah, you
and
can want more for the people you care about, but I don't think that means he's disconnected or feels embarrassed. The movie is
okay,
showing you the very
fair
real reason they need
enough.
to get out of the situation they're in.
Fair enough. But his intention was to always pull them out of the situation.
Yes,
Very
and the
much
movie
like,
showed you why he wanted to,
but
not because of
and
any like
very
vain reasons.
right, but very much for the very, very similar reasons that, and this is where I'm like, the movie does a really, really weird job when it goes to the, for lack of a better term, what I will call the ancestral plane. When they revisit the dad and all this kind of stuff, where I'm like, oh, you didn't realize your purpose was to bring everyone, unite them, and bring them to a better life, and that Jaime's purpose is basically the exact that. But in order to do that, you have to accept the Blue Beetle. You have to do all this kind of stuff, and you're bringing all of them out of poverty, theoretically speaking. But they don't do a good. You're right. They don't do a good enough job of connecting those things because the Blue Beetle thing at this point, over the course of a weekend, has no long-term vision. This is a
Mm-hmm.
small-scale movie, and this is a grounding movie. Like what the movie you're talking about is like, we spent years with those characters. This is a character that you're right, we have to map on things that we know from what we know and what we see. And this is what I see is this is a character that wanted to break out of this area for a very real reason that got imposed on them that he didn't know of, but he wanted to do it anyways on his timeline, his way, by breaking them out of poverty to a different place, right off the bat, cool. But then he's like, right off the bat, he's like, oh man, this sucks. I can't do that version of that, but I have to help in this way. So he's struggling to find that middle ground of not being able to
I don't.
achieve his
I mean, I
dream.
didn't see it that way.
I
I saw
saw
it
it
as
that
him being.
way.
I saw it as him being like, "Oh yeah, I could have been here earlier doing something different to still do the thing I wanted to do, which is get us out of here." And now we're on the back foot because you didn't tell me about that. Because
Mm,
like what you're talking about, he's not like. It's not like they were like, "Oh, we're just gonna." Like, his whole thing was, "Okay, I'm back now." So like, I see him daydreaming about the stuff he told his sister he was going to do, but
yep.
that was always the plan. Nothing has shifted. It's just now he can be with his family and be there as opposed
Mm-hmm.
to off somewhere else doing it.
But I think what matters is, again, what the character wants us to see, which is this version of him that doesn't exist. And we see that grounded element because his family never leaves him, right? And that's, I think, what works really, really well is like, why you fronting, bro? When like all the time his family's like, you got this amazing job, you did this, and which is the best, most supportive thing ever. I'm like, this family rocks. I love that so much about them that they're pulling up every single time. I'm like, this is great. That's love and support that I love seeing. But he's like, yo, you're embarrassed. I like that dichotomy of like, especially with this audience. I'm like, this isn't, for teenagers. It's for kids. This is very much for them, which is why I like the fact that it's a one-off. It has, to me, I'm like, when we get to the post-credit scene, like, I don't know if that was responsible, whether or not they should have just left that part out. But the idea of where does this go from here? Does this just Blue Beetle up? And they're like, hey, we're announcing a young whatever, and that's where the Blue Beetle franchise is going to go. I don't know, but they've neither really confirmed or denied anything. But to me, I see that in this character, the immigrant dream of I'm going to pull this out. I'm going to want a better life in different kind of ways, and I see that in Jaime's character, and I identify with it, and it worked for me. It was rocky, but it got there in the end, where I'm like, okay, you've accepted this, that you have to adapt this Blue Beetle thing with you. You have to work together along with your family. You just have to integrate in, and then everything will start to work itself out. It just starts stewing, and it's great. His
Okay.
aspirations really mess up everything. And the thing is, when you're like, what's
I
your
don't
what's
know
her
that he has
face?
any aspirations beyond what you said. Like I
He is.
think this movie is very it more than most movies like this is really shining a light on how reactionary he is and how he doesn't really have any
100%.
forward motion. So like
Yeah.
there's this scene where he's like gets into the like he's saving Jenny from her
Mhm.
when the people are trying to shoot at her house,
Yeah.
and she's like go, and he's like what, and
Yeah.
then there's this scene at the end of the movie where he's like go they're gonna go onto the bug mobile, but
Mhm.
then he's like no, you go ahead, I'll just wait, and I'm like okay, what's his plan here, and he's just watching and he's like what's going on, like I'm like dude, you have like you can't still be like looking for what to do at the end of the movie. And I think that shone through more than anything for me, is that we are looking at this guy who's just like I had a plan, but this superhero thing has truly like thrown all of that off. I don't
Mhm.
think staying home threw that off. I think the superhero part of it did. And I was already
Yep.
afraid of that watching the first like 20 minutes of the movie, which was like, they've got a really clear line of what they need to do here. And I don't see how being a superhero like factors into this at all. And the
It,
movie never
yeah.
really solved how that factored in.
But here's the thing, it's just like the accidental aspect of there's a couple of different ways to have the superhero stuff. Either you volunteer, an accident happens to you, right? And when the accident happens to you, you either your decisions make you either a villain or a hero. Very much like this show points out. I mean, this this movie points out. It's like, but I mean, not in the right way, because I'm like, okay, what's her face, Victoria Cord, what mind wipe Fairfax and whatever. So you didn't really get conscious decision, versus Jaime did, is, but he still influenced whatever. The idea of, you still have the idea of the decisions make the hero or villain, all that kind of stuff. And Fairfax makes the decision he makes, for the better or worse, at the end of the movie, when he gets conscious thought again. What I'm saying is, this whole thing gets thrust upon him.
Mm-hmm.
We accept origin stories like Spider-Man, and that's just a freaking spider bite accident that happens randomly. So this is a situation where I'm very, very like, what I'm not convinced about, and who I want to point fingers at more in this, is what's her face, the person that really gets the whole thing going. That like, here's the Beetle,
Jenny
I'm
Cord.
gonna put Jenny Cord. She's who I blame more than anything else. What was her plan? She had a plan. She knew what was going on. She had everything, all the knowledge, and this is what I'm going to go in on unsupported. I'm going to steal this. I'm going to do this. Her thrusting it onto Jaime made sense to me, in the sense where I know you enough to know that I can trust you to get out of here, because I am in the security.
I don't know
But
how you think
here's a
she knows him, but okay.
well enough to get something out of there, because what was her decision? I'm in the facility that I'm supposed to be a chairperson of. I'm going to run away from security when there's security footage on me and put the heat on me? No, give the thing to him right away, get out, find him later, because you've got contact information already, and then trust not to open it. Like, she was very clear, do not open it, do not open it. The family opens it. Like, he did everything right, and he's just reacting, you're absolutely right, to a scenario that gets thrown upon him. And I'm like, that makes sense to me. This is a teenager, he's trying to figure out stuff. Why wouldn't he react to the information that's being processed? At no point am I convinced he wants to be a hero in any other way than to protect his family. And by the end of the movie, he, for better or worse, does that inconsistently with his powers in the stupid ways as a teenager would, or a new grad in the situation from a new
He's not a
undergrad.
teenager, he's 22.
Yeah, he's 22, like an undergrad. I'm like, okay, so he's been partying in Gotham. He's been doing whatever. Why do I expect him to be Iron Man like Tony Stark and take on that mantle right away? Like, this made sense to me.
So what I'm saying is, it doesn't really matter what he thinks, because for most of the movie, the Scarab is making the decisions for him. And
yeah.
The only, to the extent that you can be like, yeah, that makes sense, doesn't make it good. It makes it weird, because what you're doing is writing yourself into a corner where you're making a movie about someone who doesn't make any decisions and actually has their decision making abilities cut out from them in a movie where everyone else is making decisions. You can argue Carapax isn't, but his
Right.
family members are. Jenny Cord is, Victoria Cord is. You're putting him in a situation where, and it's not like the 2018 movie I was talking about, where someone is information collecting and actively doing something else, even though it looks like they're not doing anything. They're active. He's just like, oh, this is happening now. Oh, this is happening now. It's I don't have enough of a connection with him to feel like okay, like this is him how it's just like the movie's just doing whatever it needs to do, which is fine.
Mhm,
That's the plan, is to just have a throwback action movie, just
mhm.
have fun. But I think that then I'm at a disadvantage because I don't truly feel the movie is giving this character who is showing flashes of stuff an
Mhm.
opportunity to truly shine in whatever way they would shine, instead of, well, for this moment this has to happen because this is what's happening. I never get
Mhm.
a sense of what he is like when he's actually thinking through a problem.
Really?
Yeah.
Because he pushes through in multiple points to me. He's just like, well, I'm gonna now accept this role. And here's the thing too. He throughout the movie, he's like, I want to do this. I want to help the family. I want to do this. And when he's given opportunities to, I disagree with you. He makes decisions counter to what he's actually going to say. I'm going to help the family. Cool. Gets a part-time job, like how the sister's helping the family right now. It's not a realistic thing long term, but it's sustainable. It is stable until he gets the next thing.
Mhm.
And then the first decision he makes, and he knows he was just trained on employee handbook and all that kind of stuff. Granted, sister not the best influence, needed to take a dump in the nice bathroom, which 100% I'm like, I like the sister way more because of that scene. Um, I, he makes the first decision to be unprofessional and be like, hey, can I get a job? I'm an undergrad to Victoria. I'm like, you're not supposed to be there. Why are you drawing attention to this? Like you're making bad decisions. That's what I expect. That's who the character is. And then eventually he's shown the way that people have been helping you all along. This AI has been helping you all along, whether you like it or not. And at the end of the movie, he goes along with the decisions because he factors in, okay, this is not what I want, it's what I need. And that's what I really like about this is everything's showing him, giving him options of this is what you need, this is what you need, this is what you need, but this is what I want is to daydream and do this and be grandiose and have this big lottery sensation to pull my family out of this very real time frame. And I like the fact that you pointed it out because I'm like, I wish that did factor into this movie a little bit more. But because then the criticisms you have, I would be like, I would agree with a lot more. If it didn't occur in what I'm convinced was over a weekend, I'm like, yeah, he should have had that processing power. He should have been able to do small level crimes or figure out with great power comes great responsibility or anything like that. But within the course of a weekend, in this kind of scenario where his dad dies, he's making all the decisions I would expect someone in his position to make. And especially for someone that has no idea, had no indication of being like, no, I was secretly in Gotham trying to learn from Batman or trying to get hints from, like, there's nothing like that. He's a
Yeah,
real world grounded
you're
character. I like
I
that.
know it doesn't sound like we're saying the same thing. You just liked it. And what I'm saying is they
Mm-hmm.
wrote themselves into corners that don't truly make sense for highlighting what you're trying to get across. You're just saying it worked for you. But I'm just saying those are all
Yeah.
things that are weird. Like in a movie where you're trying to make me fall for the main character, why would you write it in a weekend? Why would you write it so this, like, why wouldn't you give me the time? Like, it's an over 2 hour movie. There's
Mm-hmm.
time for me to, like, figure, like,
Mm-hmm.
he just graduated from university, so he's not the kid you're talking about. He is someone that achieved higher learning. So that means you do have different thought processes. You do have
I
different ways of thinking.
completely agree.
And none of that
Mm-hmm.
applies to what he's doing. Everything you're explaining, it makes sense if the kid's like 15, yes. But he's not. And we just spent time talking about how he went for higher learning. And it was very specifically pre-law, meaning you are thinking through things and problem solving.
Right.
Meaning some of that should be on display in a
We
better way than what you're talking about. Because what you're talking
would
about is
hope.
making these split second decisions, sure. But what I'm talking
Mhm.
about is if you're setting this up for the character, why not make that part of how things play out?
Well, you point out you make very, very good points. I'm just saying you're right. We are talking about the same thing, but virtually it did work for
Yeah.
me much more than it worked for you, obviously. But it to me, I'm like, this is a character that has been lost for quite some time. That's been off in Gotham daydreaming for the better part of an undergrad and partying and living up his lavish lifestyle and all that kind of stuff. And this is a character where he gets a lot of wake calls real fast and has to readjust and I like the moments that he's like, "This is what your delusion's costing us." All this kind of stuff, and uh, there were emotional things that were I'm like, "This is really forced," but it actually works for me because everything else is kind of inconsistent. So I'll take it where I can get it. So I remember things as because I will say for our audience, this is like a week out from when I watched it.
Hmm.
So I'm just like remembering the bits that really, really work and the things that really didn't, like Jenny Cord. I'm like, you're a dumb character. This is all because of you, because you made bad decisions and you had no backup plan. You had
It's weird because you
no,
just went through why you thought she did the right thing. So I don't
no,
understand what you think her bad.
which
Just
she did the right.
yeah,
No, I
you were
was
like she made the right choice because she knew she could trust him and she already had his contact information. And
to react in that scenario. What I mean is she had no idea what she was doing when she stole the scarab in the first place. I'm like, why didn't you have a better plan to get that out? Like, that was all on her, but she reacted in the scenario like to the best of her ability. Doesn't mean that she had a good plan going into it. I'm like, I really, really hate on that. I'm like, no, you should have known better. You've been on the board. You know this, these people. You know the system. You should have had a better thing. And instead, you just literally put it in a fast food box, and that was your plan. That was what you reacted to. That's what I'm saying. Is her initial plan
okay,
sucked. Her reaction, what she ended up with, best she could do. Because what are you gonna do? FedEx it somewhere?
yeah, I don't.
Secure.
I guess I don't understand why you're bringing it up if there is no clear answer
No, I'm just
for
I'm just
her.
saying is what I'm saying is Jaime's character to me doing the best he could given what Jenny screwed up. Because I do heavily criticize a lot of her character decision making process. I'm like, oh, okay, you could have revealed this a lot earlier. And to be fair, she did when it was necessary. But I'm like, you're holding back a lot of information. You know a lot more. You're just doing things, and you don't
I don't.
have a plan, and it sucked. I didn't like her character.
Yeah, I guess I don't agree with that because she, to the extent you thought she reacted well, then I don't understand what the point
She
is.
reacted well in the mess that she
So
made.
she
But
found
she
out
made
that
a
they
mess.
actually found the scarab, and then she went to go get it, and then got caught. But like, I
But
don't understand what you think was going to happen otherwise.
when you find out that it's not like she heard a security guard like, oh, we found it, it's over there, and she's like, oh, I got to get it right away, and then whatever. She was like, no, I know they have it. I have a few hours or whatever to put together a better plan than to just
But what's
do
the better
what she
plan?
did. Literally anything. That's what
No.
I'm saying. It sucked about
Okay.
her character is that her heist sucked. Her heist
Okay.
sucked so much,
All
which is
right.
conveniently what led to the accident that got him to become Blue Beetle.
All
To me,
right.
this is a story about getting him to accept the situation he's in rather than to try to turn it into something else. And the movie does very, very well at doing that because once you accept it, you're actually able to help and support the people there. Like he was given opportunities multiple times, like I said, with the job, and he just chose to not do that. That's how I see
I
the
don't
movie.
remember. I just saw it yesterday. That's not how it played for me. He
That's
gets the
fair.
job, and then his sister fucks it up, and then
His sister does fuck it up too. That's why
So
I
I don't
pointed
know
out.
what you mean by
Well,
like.
he's
In
also
fact,
like,
he
I
was
want to
actually
go
trying to
here.
clean, and she was like, "No, don't actually clean because then we don't have a job." So at no like, yes, he's daydreaming, but have you never daydreamed on the job?
Yeah, but I've been working while I've been daydreaming.
That's yeah. Where was he when he was daydreaming?
He was not working. He was literally.
Oh, okay, well then I guess we have different definitions because I don't know how you
Hmm.
can be working while daydreaming. You're
You look
daydreaming
like
or you're working.
if anyone's worked in the kitchen industry, you just look like you're cleaning. You're just daydreaming
So
off,
then you're not working.
disassociated. Exactly, but you
So,
look
okay,
like
so
you
that's what we're
are.
talking about. That's what we're talking about.
Okay,
You're
fair
not
enough.
working while you're daydreaming.
But he's not doing anything. He was just hands in his pocket. I'm gonna
I
wear my
will say
shades,
this:
look off
there's
into the
no one in
sunset.
the shot with him, so I don't think it was an actual representation of what it looked like or what was happening. Because then later on, you see a bunch of people actually in the shot. So
Yeah,
I
when you
think
scale
what
up.
you're doing is fair, but having just seen the movie, I don't. I wholesale disagree with your idea that he was trying to do something else while he had the job. In fact,
Okay.
that scene plays out as someone who is truly trying to cling on to that job
Mhm.
while his sister's like, we don't really need to take that this seriously.
Right. Okay. That is because I definitely am. Like I said, that's why I'm like,
Yeah.
full disclosure. Mine was a week
Yeah.
ago. But I still harp on Jenny because I'm just like, I get that you have to do this, but there was no plan there, and I stand by that. There was just no plan for to steal the scarab in a safe, secure way. With
Yeah.
heists, sort of like, oh, I'm going to involve this person. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do nothing. That's what I think was a bummer. It was just like, oh, you just so happen to be here. Okay, I'm going to react. It's all on her. But I mean, one thing I will say, the transformation, and this is what was really, really cool to me. I was like, Ari Aster's a part of this movie? Like the guy that did Midsummer and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh yeah, when I watch the transformation scene, I'm like, that makes sense. That is a great scene. He is,
Yeah.
and I like that every single time he's there's no like he's just always naked every single time afterwards. I think that's great. It's hilarious. There's like no benefit for him to be like, oh, I'm just gonna transform at will. He's like, no,
Yeah, you gotta
he's
pick your
always got to go
moments.
home. I think it's great. It's so funny and embarrassing. It's got a couple of good bits to it. I like
Yes, I would say that.
it.
I think yeah, so yeah, I don't think he's really well deployed in this movie, but I understand because I think what people like about it is that you don't really have to think about it. I think there's just
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's just some fun stuff because I was pretty bummed out by the actual sequence where he like cuts the bus in half. I'm just like, oh, this isn't really like they're making it very clear he is not in control, which is fine.
Mhm.
But I would also think that's an opportunity to do like another 2018 movie that came later in that year. An opportunity to be like, okay, well, this alien being that is clearly a symbiote who has connected with him might have some opinions, and maybe they could have a fun back and forth. Maybe they could actually treat this creature like not AI in a suit. Maybe this would be something that makes it stand out and gives this
Mhm.
something more to do. But it was just like, oh no, it just feels like his commands aren't going in, and I'm like,
Yeah.
why not play with that a bit more? Because as you said, the movie is about him accepting his reality.
Mhm.
And his reality is he's got an alien being that's connected to him and is merging with him. But there's moments where if you've got Kajida being like, don't like Jaime, remember we're not killers. It's like, yeah, if we had more conversations, and I don't mean constantly talking about I'm not a killer. I just mean more conversations between the two of them. It would have felt better. And I understand during the process he just melds with her because he went to the ancestral plane and learned
Mhm.
to do it. But it's more like we didn't have to do things in these just the moment sections. Like he just gets the beetle because he was there, or we only find out about Karabax's background right before he dies. Like you can spread that through the movie and have give people time to truly engage with some of these concepts you're introducing. Not everything has to just be like,
Mhm.
and now his brainwaves are linked, so now they can work together.
Mhm.
Let's have some kind of characterization of this alien being that is attaching to him before that.
So one thing is, I 100% agree with that. I 100% agree with that. Where I feel like this movie was very, very much interested in focusing its attention on was comedy and
Mm-hmm.
action, which I
Yes,
think it
yeah.
does a very, very good job of both of those things. And it's just like, let's make sure people have a good time
Mm-hmm.
and disperse as much good representation of Latino culture throughout here without being stereotypical or I don't know like negative in any kind of way, and they do a very, very good job of that, I feel. And then like, okay, that's what they were trying to accomplish. We're trying to either end the DCEU on a positive note, which I'm like, yeah, I would have liked this ending to the DCEU more than Aquaman 3 at this
Two.
point, or 2 or whatever might be.
It
Yeah,
feels like three because he's been in so many movies, but no, it's just
right.
two.
Yeah, it's just
Just
2.
two.
I'm like, oh, if they put Aquaman 2 or like Wonder Woman 3, that Gal Gadot like was like, oh yeah, we're doing. I'm like, shut up, you can't say that. Like you're not. You're just stirring up the internet right now. That's not fun. You're
Sounds like she
campaigning.
was lied to, but that's another thing.
Well, I mean, there's that, but she's campaigning. She's doing something. I don't know, but whatever. Either way, it's
I
just
would
like I'd
say
rather
if
this
we
be
were
the
talking about that,
ending.
I would look more towards Saffron and Gunn. They've done some kind of awkward things as it comes to the female characters in this little thing. Like some of the
Mhm.
comments they made about Batgirl, I was like, okay, noted.
I'm
Noted.
not exactly sure what you're referencing right now,
They
but
said, "Oh, it was a good decision to get rid of that movie." And I'm like, "All right, well, you just lost 200 million on the Flash that you were saying was the best movie ever." And so then when I hear that
that's
what was
I can't
told
defend
to,
that.
so what I was told to what I heard was told to Gal Gadot about Wonder Woman 3 makes sense, only for them to turn around and be like, "No, we're not doing that with her." I think a lot of things were done on their end that are towing the line for the company that we're not talking about because they're struck,
Mhm.
that don't really align with the outward facing thing they do on Twitter and other things.
Hmm. Well, that would be new for us.
And I'm saying that as someone who doesn't
Sarcastically.
necessarily like Gal Gadot and her stuff. I'm just saying
Yeah, I'm
I
not the
don't
biggest
really
fan
think
either.
she's the one that should be embarrassed in this situation, other than the obvious stuff. I think it's a bit more embarrassing to have that be exposed by someone you said you had a conversation with.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
That's just
So
that's just
that's all
making
I'll
her
say
look
on that.
dumb in front of all her friends. That's not
But
cool.
also, like, okay, so now
You're
it's
right.
known that you tell people stuff just to get them
To
to
shut
leave
up.
you alone. Yeah.
Or yeah, to manipulate them and just
Yes.
go away.
So that's all I'll say on
Basically,
it.
you were diagnosed with IBS.
Yeah.
For those that have been diagnosed with IBS, it's a get out of my office diagnosis.
Yeah. So
Boom.
that's what I would say about that situation. But we can keep talking about Blue Beetle.
Yeah.
I think yeah, you're right. They want people to have a good time, which actually made me feel, as you can tell, I was not really engaged with this movie on an
Nope.
emotional level, because
Mhm.
I also found the initial transformation very jarring, considering how
Absolutely.
funny stuff was before. And
Yeah.
then when the whole sequence where his dad dies, I'm like, oh, like they're being real now, and it doesn't
Yeah.
feel like a smooth transition into it either. It feels like we're in a different
Hmm.
movie. And it
Hmm.
feels like we're in a different movie in during the because I saw that YouTuber Captain Midnight be like, oh, it's really good because it would have been scary with different editing. I'm like, no, I was in the theater with kids. It was scary to them.
Yeah.
I don't think cutting to the family screaming helped either, because now you're just adding to the tension of it.
Yeah.
They're not like it's not a. There are some gags in it, but for the most part, they're screaming in horror at watching
Yeah.
a family member possibly die. And so it
Yeah.
was just like, I don't think it's as fun. And again, we're adults, so however we take it is different. But it felt like a movie aimed at kids until it wasn't. So like, there's like a lot
Yeah.
of boner jokes. There's a bunch of stuff where I'm just like,
Can't believe
oh, like
they did
why
that.
did we or the hey, is it hitting yet? Did it hit for you?
Yeah,
And
the
then
substance stuff.
yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
just like, oh, like that's not for kids. And
So
I get when you do a
yeah.
movie that's for everyone, but it was just like this felt like it couldn't possibly be for everyone. It would be you enjoy like the way I enjoy Ninja Turtles for really
Mhm.
leaning into being for kids. It
Yep.
doesn't. So I'm not saying like, oh, it's a kids movie. It can never be good. I'm saying if you are leaning into the kids stuff, lean into the kids stuff, because there's nothing I don't think about Ninja Turtles that felt, oh, that's not okay to like, or that's going to be something you have to explain to a kid
Mhm.
later. There's
Mhm.
maybe some interesting concepts like don't do things just because you think people will like you for it, but
Mhm.
it's not like, oh, why did he grab his crotch after he thought he was going to get kissed from her, or what do they mean did it hit for you, like. And I'm not saying
Right.
stuff like that you should never talk to kids about. I'm just saying it feels out of place in a movie that was so much more wholesome in other areas.
So, and you're right about that, 100%. And this is one of those things where I'm like, I don't know if this is true, but like one of those things where way back, like Simpsons is a good example where you'd rewatch it later on in life and you'd be like, oh, there's a different layer to that joke. But
Yeah.
to me, this is very on the nose with it, where it's like, hey, this joke is for the adult crowd who's who's chaperoning their
That
kids
in
now.
Simpsons isn't for
And
kids. Just because we watched it didn't mean it was for us.
no, I get that. I get that. What I'm meaning is that element of different levels of joke
Mm-hmm.
for different levels of audience with different layers, right? So that was to me what they were doing, but poorly. And they were just like, well, you know what? This movie either didn't have much of a hope, or we're going to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks and just crank everything up to 10. Like, let's give all very good, memorable moments and crank everything up, which is why
Yeah,
everything
like
doesn't
just
feel
think about
fit.
it while it's on the screen, and then don't try and like
Yeah.
piece everything together as a whole. Like, that
Yeah.
is how I think the movie was approached, which is fine.
Yep.
That's not a damning thing. Like, I hope the director doesn't feel like the movie was taken away from them, or that they had a truly gritty. Because I've heard them talk about that scene in particular. I'm like, oh, okay, so like you were having fun, you got to like do your references you wanted to do. Because I think before that, what clearly was supposed to represent like an ice attack scene was they kind of did like their Jurassic Park reference to like the water jiggling, and I'm like, okay, cool, like that's fun. But then you do like this very traumatizing, like, hey, point those guns at the innocent family while you watch real people looking on, and you're like, like this is a different movie, and this is the last time I'll say it because I think you're right, and I think I said it already at the beginning. The movie just is interested in like, this is the scene right now. What do you think?
No, it's just like, here's everything we can think of that best suits this this scene for this purpose and time.
This scene, it didn't feel like the whole was being considered every time.
Yep.
It felt like it was just like, this is the scene. What do you think?
I completely agree with you on that. There's no cohesion with that. There's no amping up of beats. There's no things that everything's a payoff immediately there, right there and then. It's immediate gratification. There's small buildups. There's small things that get that payout, like the main plot, which is why I'm like, this is the movie. They just want you to have fun. They want you to have comedy, and we're gonna make all the jokes that are either appropriate or they're not, and they're gonna. And to me, I'm like, what? You're right. This isn't a kid's movie. When I'm like, who is this really for? Because I can definitely tell you this: the actual age that this character plays, which is like what you said, like 23, 24 or something like that.
He's
like
22,
new,
yeah, he just
I'm
graduated,
22, undergrad, new grad, whatever age. So I can tell you this: they're not going to be like, oh, I connect entirely with that. Who is this for? It's a hard movie to write. You're 100% right. And that's why I feel like there was a level of self-awareness of, let's just turn everything up to 10. And there's no cohesion. It's just everything is fun for you in this moment. Or here's the thing that you're supposed to feel in this moment. And we're gonna throw so much at you to make you feel that. So you walk away at least with that feeling, like the care factor thing. You're right. Why leave it to the very, very end? It's because
especially
if we had to deal with it,
it's such a weird choice. It's like that's the first image of the movie is that dangling thing.
It's
and
violent.
Then Susan Sarandon steals it from him, and you're like,
Yep.
And I didn't even get the sense that he was brainwashed. Like when he goes, now I remember everything. I'm like, what? Like, did you forget? Because it seemed like you knew. Like
there's no
like
indication.
You like I at no point did I think you were brainwashed.
I agree.
It's just one of those things where I'm like, another opportunity. So the Kajida like missed opportunity for me. I think they had moments of it, which was really fun. You're right. Like that really helped take things over the top, or not over the top, but like get it over the line for me of like, oh, like it's fun that they're going back and forth, or she's learning from him and he's learning from her. Like, but you could do that more in the movie. There's other stuff you could drop if you're worried about time. But again, it's over 2 hours. I know it's not like 2.5 hours, but it's over 2 hours.
It's not short.
It's not like
they
were worried about like, oh, we got to get butts and seats and get them out in 90 minutes.
No,
so,
you're
like,
right. Yeah.
Why not have that development? And yeah, that Carapax I'm like, what a missed opportunity to have these two Latino men going through this similar process, and you can have them throwing jabs at each other. Like, he thinks his love for his family is what put him in this situation, so then he's gonna. But only again, that line only works if he remembers that. But if you're telling me he didn't remember stuff, then what the fuck's he talking about?
He's just being mean. He's just being a dick.
But like, again,
that's it.
He could have been like needling him the whole movie, because again, this movie is about like, your family is your superpower. I don't think that's the main thing, but that is definitely a thing that is explored in this. Your family is your superpower, and I'm not even saying I don't like that the family actually gets to beat up people at the end of this and shoot people. And I like that. Like, it's
love that. That's
they're
hilarious.
not a liability at all. They're actually helping, and they solve a lot of the problems. But to have him say that, and for Jaime to, like, Jaime doesn't really. He says, "No, my family's my power." But you're like, yeah, but like
he gets there by the end of the movie.
Yeah, but it's like, come on, like you.
That's fine. He gets there by the end of the movie. His dad just died. I'm fine for him to have that overcorrection.
It should be a thing for him. Like, does he question it or not? Because I don't even think he has like.
I don't think he ever questioned it. I just think he never knew what it meant to commit to it. And he's like,
that's what I'm saying. You need to put that on screen. That can't just be something that I infer from life experience.
You're right.
Those are the opportunities to help me lean into your character, to show him working through something. And that is my main complaint, is the movie isn't really doing that, and it's because of the writing choices. It's not like, oh, they tried and they failed. They're writing it so sometimes it feels like, well, this is just an easy way to get out of this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. So yeah, the Care Pack thing just feels like such a missed opportunity. And I think the Victoria Cord stuff, I'm assuming she's supposed to be a bit like Hillary Clinton, I think, is the issue. I know Susan Sarandon wasn't the first choice, but I know her history with Hillary Clinton, and I can see the meta-ness of that.
Sure.
And just how dismissive she is of the people that she clearly depends on, who are minorities. Like, yeah, I see all of that. But her lines are so like run of the mill. Like, it all feels like stuff they're like, just put that in, we'll figure something out later.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh, come on. Like, why?
It speaks to the character that I see that she's portraying, like a privileged, entitled woman that is fighting for what she believes is hers. Whether that rightfully be so or whatever, but it's just the idea, like, she's dismissive, like you said, using of minorities, dismissive of them, manipulative of them, all that kind of stuff, doesn't care at all about them. It's portraying that, and I'm like, it did the job it did, in the sense where I'm like, yeah, okay, it's giving you everything.
Yeah,
it's not being subtle. It's not trying to do that whatsoever.
It's not nuanced. It's more than not subtle. It's not nuanced, and I think that's the danger you have when we do these things. So I will actually say that's a problem, because I think the issue when this discourse happens about racism and people's privilege is people think, well, I'm not calling anyone the wrong last name or dismissing them like that, so there's nothing wrong with what I'm doing. So if you go too far cartoonish, then you're setting that thing up of like, yeah, I'm not like that, so I'm good. And I think there needs to be a bit more nuance. And they tried it with she got picked over, like she got hopped over, so Ted got it instead of her. I'm like, yeah, you like use that information to like give her a bit of like nuance, so that like other people can see themselves in her and not be able to just be like, nope, I'm not like her, it's all good. So there's nothing for me to work on.
But I mean, at that point, that would have been a weird element of the movie to dig in that deep, as opposed to,
I don't think
literally.
It's weird. I think a lot of good movies, like from that company,
for this movie, in context of this movie,
it wouldn't be weird for this movie, because this movie is trying to engage with things that deserve nuance.
You're right, but DC has not had a good track record of that. The last few movies
I would
that's
argue
a good
Man
thing
of Steel
too.
does it well. I think that people like to skip over that. I think Man of Steel does it well. I think
I agree.
To a point, Wonder Woman does it well. The Suicide Squad definitely does it well.
Right.
I don't think it's true that they haven't done it. I think that this movie, it's like when we were talking about, okay, I will compare it to tomorrow. When we were talking about the Eternals and they did the like Hiroshima thing, and you're like, geez, maybe don't like bite that off.
Yep.
Because you're not going to be able to do it justice.
Yep. I agree with this, but they were just, they wanted to tell their story, and that's what they wanted to do. And I'm like, okay, you're beating us over the head with it. Gotcha.
Yeah.
White ladies are racist. Not cool. But here's how they excuse it. That's great. And then here's how they victimize themselves. That's great. And I'm like, okay, cool. But everything's so on the nose, it's just offered to us. And here's the one thing with the Fairfax character I do want to ask you, because I've thought about this. If that information was offered toward the beginning of the movie, would his goal or his family not be, hey, let's empathize with him, and our job is to get him out and not kill him?
Maybe you can have a bad moment when you realize, oh no, like I'm just like Killmonger, like don't bother trying to help me. Like the damage is done. Fuck
Mhm.
you. Like,
So
I think again, I'm not trying to recreate Black Panther, but what I'm saying
right,
is we've seen examples of just because you can sympathize with the villain doesn't mean they're not still wrong or too far gone, and that
right.
it's okay to show someone trying to help someone that's not really looking to be helped.
Yeah, but you're also talking about characters that are written in roles that are supposed to be heroes, that are already pre-established heroes, that aren't learning about their powers for the first time. And that's where I'm like, okay, that's where this movie does make sense to me. I'm like, you put all those things in context where other movies have done those elements much, much better, 100%. And this movie, I think, does the mistake of trying to put all those things in and then still trying to make everyone happy. It's by far not a good movie because of those things. I still connected with it because I tried to connect with things in the sense where I'm like, okay, that's where they're coming from. That's cool. But I can 100% agree with you to the extent where they didn't pace it well. It wasn't consistently written. The only consistency was the inconsistency of like every scene is going to give me everything that I need from it. It's going to do this punchline. It's going to do this thing. It's going to give you so much drama that you have to feel an emotion right now. And it's going to do that. And the Carfax thing was awfully convenient. And I'm like, all right, cool. You can still get this to happen. All that, whatever. It's just, here's a movie. Here's the end of the DCEU.
No,
And
I don't think they were worried about here's the end of DC. But
well, I
I would
mean,
say yeah, like my main issue with how Jaime is presented is I could be wrong, but I'm not. I can't think of a movie where like so this doesn't count like Superman who was just born a superhero. I can't think of a movie where you're trying to tell me that this person's going to turn into a superhero where they're not already showing signs of like wanting to be like to like I know that you saw him being ill at ease and where he was, but I didn't. So maybe you don't agree with this at all. But I never seen one where you're just like, oh, there's a very clear path he's on, and so like to introduce the superhero part, I'm just like, oh, like why? Because he already had a game plan for what he wanted to do. Like there's no real and it's not really crime fighting. That's not what he's like looking to do.
Mhm.
I know he's pre-law, and but when I say crime fighting, I mean like being a vigilante, like going out it.
No.
Like it just didn't feel. And uh, we've already broken the seal, but like She-Hulk did a good, and I know it's a TV show, but it was like, no, I'm a lawyer. Like I already know how I'm going to fight crime.
Mhm,
And so
mhm,
that journey was her being like, oh yeah, I gotta bring it all together, and circumstances have changed, so I can't be relying on just doing it the one
mhm,
way. And that feels absent from this too. And I'm not trying to recreate that, but I'm saying to not even like touch on any type of internal conflict that way for him felt weird. Like that he's just like, well, this is what's happening now,
mhm.
and that again, it's not really tied into like I'm gonna go out and do the Shazam thing where I get paid to fight crime and that's how I help my family. Or like he never has a chance to like do anything with this. And I understand it's because of the time frame, but I'm saying they didn't have
Mhm.
to do that. That was a
Sure.
writer's choice. So it's a weird choice because
Right.
you don't even get the fun of him truly exploring his powers because we're just the powers are on display and he's just like fucking take me home, I don't want to do this. So
Yes,
there's no
horrifying.
like fun of the discovery of it for him
But
other
why
than
would
when
there
he
be fun? It's horrifying. The
because
whole
it's a
and he's
superhero
left
movie. What do you
naked.
mean
But
why would there be
in
it's a
in his
superhero movie. It's not a movie about someone who has this horrible thing happen.
okay,
It's a
so here's
superhero
the
movie.
thing. I will point this out. Spider-Man is my thing to that. Spider-Man, Peter Parker never had an aspiration of saving other people. He just had an aspiration of like Mary Jane, very, very clear cut. I want the girl next door incel crap, right? So the idea of him just getting the radioactive spider, he didn't have
To
any
be clear,
dreams of doing this.
you're
And
talking about the movies because that's not how the comics work. But continue.
yes, but I am talking about the movies.
Yeah, yeah,
That I 100% will say that. It's
yeah,
the Sam Raimi one specifically. So I
yeah.
will say that. So because I'm like, if we're going to talk about comic book, well, you know, that's not. Anyways, in the Raimi version, he has no interest in being a hero. He has no interest in whatever. He's just like, hey, whatever. And he gets it to use it for fun and all that kind of stuff because he
Well,
had no
he
interest
wants
and
to
it was
impress the
reckless.
girl, so he uses those powers to do the things to impress the girl. But that's what I'm
Yes,
saying.
but
It is
so,
connected to what he's trying to do.
but yes, you're right. And he leans into this power when he realizes that he can actually use this to serve the purpose that he actually needs in the moment that he needs. So in that situation, Peter Parker uses it recklessly, wrestling. We know how that ends out, death. This situation, he's like, no, I'm not going to use this power. I'm not going to do this. And when he does it, he's like, oh, I could use this to protect my family. But because he resisted, he never learned how the power worked. It was so late in the movie where he was like, I can make anything you think of. And then you're right. That's where it's like, why are you doing an anime sword thing right now? Or like, you're never a gamer. Like, there's no indication. For all I know, you would have done a judge book or like
Yeah, like he
based on
didn't
your
hit anyone
thing.
with a gavel or like a legal
Yeah.
book or anything. Like this,
You're right about
this
that.
is what I'm
But
saying. Like they didn't give you enough for him
no.
ending this way because,
Mhm.
yeah, the Raimi stuff still is this intervention that happens in his life is being used towards what he wants to do, and you're looking at him discover it.
But here's the thing: I push back on that because the death scene, the ancestral plane, that is the intervention. That is the thing being like,
no,
hey,
we're talking about the power intervention, not what you're talking about. Like,
what do you mean?
Getting the powers is the intervention.
Oh, I see. Okay, just the acquiring of the power. Because the thing, and this is my point: Peter Parker, until he gets the with great power comes great responsibility, this is the consequence of my action kind of stuff, he doesn't click in or do anything like based on what his power is supposed to be, right? That happens very, very quickly. We know that that's been drilled in. This is the exact same thing, except I didn't defend my family appropriately. I didn't use this power. I didn't learn about this. I could have saved my dad. My dad's the one that's helping me accept this power. I can now save my family. I could defend this. I could prevent this thing from happening. It's not just about me. It's about my community, all this kind of stuff. He gets there by the end of it. It's very, very much the same. I disagree
that a choice he made led to his dad dying the way the choice that Peter Parker made led to his uncle dying.
Yeah, inaction
going back to what
just
I'm
as much
about
as an action.
No, because he was distracted doing something else. That wasn't a decision. He wasn't like, oh, which one am I going to save? Or, hey, that's someone else's problem. And then, like, he was doing something. Like, everything is happening to him. And that is my problem with the movie.
Right, because he's like resisting. His choice is to resist. I'm resisting to learn this suit. I don't know what this suit does. I'm scared. I'm trying to get it out. That's his thing. And then through his selfish need of getting that out, he doesn't learn that I can actually adopt this, use this, and all that kind of stuff, and protect people or whatever. He could have gone there earlier. And like I point out, course of a weekend, very, very much like the Peter Parker thing in the Raimi verse. So the idea of this has never been done. Nope. Definitely push back on that. This has definitely been done. This is a character.
Oh, yeah, and I disagree wholeheartedly. I think you've moved things around to like fit there, but I disagree wholeheartedly.
Okay, fair enough. But
hasn't been done.
I think the idea here is very, very clear cut. It's enough of origin stories to be like, no, this works as the story that they're trying to tell. Is it a good story? Nope. But I get where they're coming from. I get what they're trying to do. Did I have an enjoyable time? Yeah. It was a lot of fun because of what they did. They're like, how do we make everyone happy right now? And that's where the issues come in. You're right. The anime sword got nothing connected to his character, but that's something this age group would probably like based on statistics that a board of directors probably grabbed from somewhere and would make a great trailer moment, but has no actual context within the movie. You're right about those things, but they were trying to sell a movie. They're trying to do this. And I'm like, okay, I get the business end of it, because at the end of the day, and this is what I will 100% based on the information you gave me with the Peter Safran and James Gunn, where they stood behind Flash and justified the canceling of Batgirl. I'm like, nope, that's a shitty decision. That's inconsistent. Let's just, what's going on after this? So to me, like the post-credit scene where they're like, oh, okay, there's a potential setup for more. What are your thoughts? Like, is that responsible at this point? Should they just left that out? Because I'm like, they had the option of just leaving that out and just leaving the actual post-credit scene where I'm like, that was just funny. That was just fun. The
cockroach or cricket or
the cockroach man or yeah, I'm like, that was just fun.
Yeah, that was fun. I don't know. It's a superhero movie. Like to the same extent that you're like, oh, they put an anime sword because that's what people like. I think they were like, and now let's put a teaser in it because that's what people like. I
Okay.
don't think
Yeah.
it's really. I don't have it in me to like really get on stuff like that outside of the character,
Hmm.
the characterization of characters. I think that's where they lost me. And like even when we talk about like, oh, the scene gave you everything you needed
Mm.
in each scene, I'm like, yeah, but then I'm thinking about her stealing the scarab. She stole that guy's pass card, and then somehow he gets in again. Like she never handed it back to
Oh
him.
yeah,
So
I'm
had,
glad you
like
point that. I was gonna point that
it's
out
just
too.
like yeah, like stuff like
That's
that where I'm
dumb.
just like, oh, it's just happening because it needs to. And
Mhm.
I'm not even saying that is something that truly made me not like the movie, but I was certainly not in the movie, so I noticed stuff like that.
Yeah. I definitely know. Like, I enjoyed my ride. I noticed the exact same thing. I'm like, if she stole the card, how would he get back in without trying to get someone making a bigger fuss out of it? It could have been like, security,
Like
I've
he
lost
wouldn't have
my
come in
card.
calmly. Like he definitely wouldn't have come in calmly.
Exactly.
He would like even if
It
she
would have
left
been
it
like,
open, he would have been like, "What the fuck? What's going on here?"
yeah. And even then,
And then
as
looked
an
for his
audience,
card
we would
in
have been
there.
like, exactly. And us as an audience would have been like, okay, well, if you're looking for your card and you're in the room, why do you need your card anyways? You're already in the room. Why would
Well,
you?
no, to make sure that you keep it on your person and don't leave it
I
again.
get that, but you're right. That's a huge pivotal flaw in the whole aspect of that movie. It just happened because it needed to happen. He's in the room because he needed to be in the room. Nobody knew about the scarab, which is, and this is what I'm thinking is like the biggest criticism. Like the security in this movie. Oh, huge fail. For such a multi-million-dollar company, huge fail in the
Yeah,
security
like when she's
and
like, "What do you
multiple
mean you
points in
lost
time.
her?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I mean that is pretty. Like you guys really gave up easily on that."
Yeah, multiple points in time in this movie. I'm like, the security in this, huge fail. And I'm like, that's the part of the movie where I'm like, I don't believe this. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. This is stupid. But I'm like, I'm just gonna move on real quick and just be like, all right, I'm processing the thing that they are thinking that we want, not what we need, which is a cohesive story. This is just what we want as, oh, this is like for the YouTube generation that's getting dopamine rushes every 10 minutes and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, yeah, you did a good job doing that. That's what you did.
They yeah. Also, they had like a this weird thing where Bruce Wayne bought Twitter. I'm like, okay, so that's like an Elon Musk comparison, and then Batman gets called a fascist, and I'm like, wasn't this
I
kid in
didn't notice
Gotham?
that
Like,
Easter
doesn't
egg.
he have like some? It's in Spanish, but I
Oh, I see.
specifically
I see.
looked it up because I was like, oh, like they just said Bruce Wayne in a DC
Mm,
movie, and I
I
already
see. I
know
see.
they're
I see.
gonna do a Batman as a fascist joke. But I was just like, oh, like doesn't he have like stronger opinions on like coming from the hometown of Batman? Like he spent 4 years of his life, or I mean, probably five.
Maybe that's why
No,
he
I
just
guess
kept
20.
quiet.
Yeah, I mean, again,
I mean, like, what's the
give him
point of?
something to do other than just like I want to see more out of him, and I don't think that
Hmm?
the movie. Um, sorry, I don't think the casting was wrong. To be clear,
The
I'm not
casting was
saying
very good.
I don't think the actor did a bad job. I don't like. I think a
Just
movie was
interested.
crafted that didn't give his character an opportunity to shine as much as other characters in that
Mm-hmm.
movie.
Mm-hmm. You know what the movie is, and this is the actual movie. Let's put a fuck boy in a very real situation and just keep him a fuck boy until he realizes he can't be a fuck boy anymore. That's what it is.
Yeah,
That's the whole
you
movie.
have obviously really leaned into. I don't see him as a fuck
But
boy. I don't see him as.
I
I
do
genuinely like.
know.
I'm not trying to say you shouldn't. I'm saying
Mhm.
it
You
worked
don't
for
see
you
it. I
because
get
you
it.
clearly like have strong opinions about him as a personality, whereas I have
Yes.
no idea
Well,
whatsoever.
yes, because he
I
hasn't
know he
been
loves his. I know he
real.
loves his family.
Yes, but that's the only thing.
No,
I
but
mean, because here's
you've assigned like intention to some of the stuff that he's doing, and I'm
well,
like,
yeah,
oh,
because
that's
that's what
just
he's doing. I'm not assigning. That's what he's showing
no.
us,
You
though.
are. There's no way around that. You are like it's not
And
just same way
he's
as I would be if I was giving it. But I'm saying I don't even have enough information to do that. What I'm saying, like until you hear it from the actor or the character, you are assigning stuff. Like that's what you're doing.
fair enough,
But what I'm saying,
but that's
so
all art. is subjective to that, right? So,
So what I'm saying is
yeah.
you are doing that, and what I'm
100%.
saying is I didn't even feel like there was enough there for me to do that.
And there was enough there for me to, because I'm like, there's elements of this character where I'm like, yeah, that's what we're dealing with right now, and that's why I'm like, and I'm glad it sucks that I connect with that, if that's my interpretation with it. I'm like, oh, cool, I connected with that, which is great because I'm like, younger days, Ben. Cool, get that out of here. But that's why I'm like, okay, this is a character that just daydreams. You didn't connect with it because he doesn't show you anything that's actually his personality. And that's
Yeah.
my point. He's showing you what he wants. He's never showing you
No,
what
I'm
he
saying he doesn't
needs.
even do that.
He does. He wants the
Not for me.
lifestyle.
It's clear it worked for you, but
Right.
I'm saying it didn't work for me.
Fair
And
enough.
I'm not refuting that. It worked for
Right.
you,
Yeah.
and that was the point of what I was saying, is that
Right.
it worked for you so much so that you are able to assign these things of
Yeah.
intention to certain things that to me just felt like, what the fuck is happening here?
Yeah, because to me, I was just like, oh, this is just an Instagram delusional kid, like, and that just wants this lifestyle, but won't accept the reality if you got to work for it or whatever it might be. And maybe that's just like, me being older than the intended audience or whatever the hell the intended audience is. But it's just the idea of like,
Yeah,
that's what I saw in the character. I'm
Yeah,
like,
because
cool,
I
fuck
guess
boy.
my thing was like, you say that, but like he just finished university, meaning he has no time to not work for it. Like he already put in the work. That is the work
Right.
that he's supposed to be doing. So I didn't really understand that take you had. And I'm not saying it's a wrong thing. I'm just saying like it doesn't make sense to me, because to me, I'm watching him at the end of putting in that level of work to get to the next step, which is the job. So we're in the between it, and then we watched him lose that first job and then try for the second one. So I still didn't really understand what you meant by like not doing what he needs to do or didn't want to work.
You got me there on that point, but it's just the idea of that he would he's just he's doing what he wants to do
I mean, okay,
versus
sure.
what he needs
I
to.
don't think
That's
the
how I
case.
see it. I think you got me on the aspect of like, I gotta read, because again, 1 week out, the idea of like, was he the one that initiated the disaster that got him fired? No, probably it was the fact that it was probably a combination of both of them, if
Well,
we're
he got
honest.
fired for intervening in a family matter, but like,
Yes, but she
at
sealed
least
the
that's
deal.
him trying to be some. Not, and I don't mean the hero in the like white knight way. I just mean like he saw something wrong and he tried to do something about it way.
Yeah.
But he's only there because he was trying to do right by his sister, who was doing something that was going to get them fired.
Yep.
So,
He's not a heroic bone in his body. You're absolutely right about that. He's just a character that's learning to do it, learning to step up to the plate.
Yeah,
because
so it didn't feel like you, like when you were talking about how he lost, and I'm not saying you said this exactly, but I thought that your thought process was like, he's too busy daydreaming to take the work seriously, but that's not how it actually plays out in the movie.
I think you've got me there. I've got to reconsider that, because I mean, you know what? If I do rewatch this movie, but
I don't think either of us are rewatching this movie.
I probably will not. I
don't
will
think
say
we
that, but I will say they played. That's how I saw his character. As like, okay,
that's what I'm saying.
You had a dream. You had a dream. It got taken away because of real life situations that aren't anyone's fault, but you have to deal with it no matter what. You're dealing with it by still trying to have a part of what you wanted to, but that's not realistic. And then he's just not going along with the situation that he needs to, which is, hey, this power is now, that's ridiculous to say, but like, this power is now thrust upon you. Do you just keep ignoring it and reacting and letting that decision of like, hey, maybe I should try to understand what this is? Maybe I should try to like figure out this. Like, you're right. There's no scene like that because he refuses to try to do that. He's just like, let's get this out of me, which is realistic for that kind of character. And it would derail the whole thing of like, I want to get a law job or whatever it might be, even though he's not qualified to practice law. Like,
yeah, but
my
like,
point.
yeah, going back to my first point, which was I was worried when I was like, well, he has to become a superhero because everything you're talking about is the issue. He already had a path, and I think it's clear to everyone watching what that path is, and being a superhero doesn't help, and it might not hurt, but it's not truly connected to, like we talked about with Peter Parker or other characters, hit what he's actually trying to accomplish. Because my argument is that he's still using the Spider-Man stuff to acquire things to impress Mary Jane. We didn't
Yep.
even see him try to use the superpowers to acquire work so
Money.
that he could get to do anything. Like, he's not trying to do anything with it other than get himself out of it. And I understand. Yes, I'm also acknowledging, yes, that makes sense for the timeline. But again, why even make it that timeline? Why do that and shoot yourself in the foot?
I agree. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense. And like I said, my interpretation of this movie is not, my rating of this movie is not going to be high. I'm just going to say I enjoyed it for what it was because I didn't have high hopes going into it. They gave me a lot more comedy that worked a lot better than I thought it would. And to me, they gave me that roller coaster very successfully without me feeling a lot of the mids where it's like, yeah, I'm laughing now because George Lopez did something silly, and then now I'm crying because we're forced to cry. We're dealing with this ancestral plane thing, and we're like, right, the dad died in the scene before, and that's something he hasn't dealt with, but he has to right now, and
Right,
he has to accept his role
for sure. The dad was dead, and so he has the initial moment of, "What are you doing here?"
Yeah, and he's like, you know why I'm here, like, and I'm like,
I think
okay,
that stuff works.
Yeah.
Again, it's all about the disbursement of all these good scenes, because I'm not saying this movie is devoid of good scenes. I'm just saying, like, they come at times where I'm already like, I mean, is this too little too late, or like what's going on?
Because
Because
it's too much. Well, yeah, it is 100%. Let me ask you, did you have high hopes for this movie
no,
within the first 30 minutes of it?
nothing about the trailers led me to believe they had much to work with. It seemed like they really were like nailing down he splits a bus in half, and the transformation's going to be weird. I think early stuff I was like, oh, does Susan Sarandon turn out to be bad? But then later stuff, trailers I'm talking about, not movie.
Yeah.
It was just like, oh no, she's
stuff.
just going to be bad the whole time. Okay, so I guess that's enough of that character development. So I was just like, and then he's going to fight a red beetle or something like that, which I know he doesn't actually, but it's essentially what happens without the interesting nature of them trying to connect philosophically on this. They're just throwing, no, I am strong because of my family, and he's like, no, you're not, and it's like, okay, fine. So yeah, I didn't have high expectations, and I think the movie did surprise me in places like George Lopez, and I figured, based on everyone's reaction, that I would like the family, so I'm glad that was true, that I liked the family. And I like the fight scenes. I think that anytime he actually got to fight, and it wasn't that weird shit where they're like zipping the camera around because he's not truly in control, it was good. I thought that was engaging, and it got me excited in those moments, but I think that they did themselves a lot of disservices, and it didn't, and I'm hoping it's studio intervention that did this, but it just felt like, why aren't we doubling down on our protagonist? It just felt like he was kept at a distance from me, and that made me stay at a distance for the movie in general.
No, I completely agree with that because they're more interested, I feel, in building the world around him, building the characters around him, making us less connected, not intentionally making us less connected to him, but unintentionally that makes us less connected to him.
Sure.
Yes, I think it was very, very unintentional. I think the biggest issue is the idea that because he spends the majority of 2 acts refusing the powers, that it's not like at any given point in time where it moves fast enough from a theory, like from a storytelling standpoint, where we're left with satisfaction, right? The fact that he accepts his powers after it's like, oh, I accepted my dad died, sucks. It really does suck, because after that first act where he's like, you got the powers now, you've had a little bit of fun, you know what it could be doing, so you're starting to use it for good, and now you realize that the level of what you have to step up to would have 100% been better. It's the fact that, okay, we're dealing with the scenes in superhero movies where they're refusing and we just don't want to see it. What we want to see, or at least for myself, I should say, what I want to see is them actually taking on that role. And like everything you just said, whenever he's like aligning with the character and like like working with the AI and doing all the, for lack of a better term, the AI, whenever he's doing that, it actually gets better. It actually gets better.
I think they had room to have him
Mm-hmm.
truly form a relationship with
Yes.
Kajida. Like it didn't have to just be a sound in his suit. And I'm not saying physically have her on screen. I only say her because obviously it's a female voice. The Yellow Ranger from that Power Rangers movie that should have got a sequel. But like Becky G. But like I think like they did in Venom, like the big reason I went to Venom 2 was, I like when Eddie and Venom talk to each other. Like I didn't necessarily think that was a good movie, but at least they had that like bedrock of those two interacting together is fun. And because she can teach him stuff and he can teach her stuff, and it isn't the same dynamic of they're both losers from their planets. It really like they could just be high achieving or people that want to achieve high things, like and that kind of clash would be interesting to watch and not feel derivative of what they did in Venom. It would have felt like its own thing, and it would have, I thought, made things better.
Yeah, and I agree. I think we're saying the same thing because
yes, we are. I'm just saying
because
my words.
The empathy, that connection, and all that kind of stuff with the AI or the alien, and that's where I'm like, all right, cool. It's alien tech, which conveniently can adapt to human computers and that's based on scarabs, which is
throughout. You're like
Egyptian.
Oh, she's learning things, or like picking like. I saw the fucking new Rockstar thing where it's like, oh, you can see the reflection of the Virgin Mary or whatever, and like, so maybe that's why she takes on a female voice, or but like, and I'm not saying she needs to explain that, but if you had moments of her like vocalizing that she's picking up on all these things from his life, other than the one time she's like, remember, we're not killers, and you're like, yeah, okay. It feels better when you get to the remember we're not killers part, because maybe it feels like he won a philosophical debate with her instead of just like he's losing it and she pulled him back. Like it feels like a better payoff. And so I think we are saying the same thing. I don't disagree.
It came way too late in the movie. 100%. The empathetic connection with that alien that's fully integrated in, it came way too late. 100% agree with that. It had it been, we spent way too long of a period of time where he's just resisting it and just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. He spent too little of a time actually doing hero things. But the problem with the movie is because I had so much fun during that period of time because of things around him and not him, I still had fun with it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. It is what it is. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I wish we spent way more time with I don't know the Kajida. If we did, that to me would have been like great. The fact that he's not so much of a character matters a little bit less, because him understanding and integrating in with ultimately who the alien, that makes a lot more sense. Like the Venom Eddie Brock thing, it's like, oh, we're both losers. I can empathize on that. This is like, oh, cool. Tell me something about the scarab. Is there more of these scarabs that just wants to kind of protect their family, and this is the last one? So, but since
it's like it has to pick you. It's like, well, why
exactly.
did she pick? Like you could.
Why
I'm not saying this would work, but I'm saying the movie to me made more sense if the scarab picked Uncle Rudy. Like that was someone who was like, oh, like I'm against the system. I actively do things. Like I'm an active character, and I'm like, yeah, like I don't know. One thing I did like, I've spent this whole time bashing the movie. I liked when the grandmother initially says, "There's going to be a time to cry, but it's not now." At first, I was like, I don't like that message. Like, let people cry. But then they made a point of letting the family, and everyone was together at that point. Not everyone was together when she said that, which made it retroactively even better. But when everyone was together, including Jenny, she said, now we can cry. And the movie let them cry on screen. It didn't cut. Like, it wasn't like a smile, laugh line. Like, now we could cry. Now we can cry. And you got to watch their cathartic moment of crying about the events. I thought that was really well done. That was a good setup and payoff thing.
Yes. Yeah. Like they know how to deliver the motions in this movie,
I don't
which
know, it's
is
the only time I thought they knew how to do it. But yes,
well,
the
okay.
dad stuff on paper is upsetting, but I think the execution of it, I was just like, I mean, what? Like, and it's
Well,
because of what I was talking about
right.
it.
What I'm
For me, that needs to be
Mhm.
connected to something that Jaime did wrong, and I didn't see how he did anything wrong in that moment for this to
No,
truly to be what you were talking about. And I think what you were talking about is how that should have played out.
yeah, it should have been your reluctance, your refusal to
Yes.
understand this thing cost, because it should have been later on, like you figured out, oh, I can actually use this AI to develop anything I wanted. I could have developed shields around them or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the mistake, right? It's just, and that's when we were like, he doesn't make it. He's like, there's no decision. I'm like, I see reluctantly pushing against something as a decision. So I'm like, he's deciding not to take on this role that's being put in front of him right now. And that's the decision that cost him. But the movie doesn't do a good enough job of doing that at all. So yeah, that's us being the mature adults that we are, looking back and being with enough film critical analysis, throughout the years to be like, yeah, this is what they're trying to do. They didn't do a good job of it, but we get it.
Yeah.
That's where I'm coming at it from. I'm like, this is the emotion you're trying to communicate. I can meet you there, but I can definitely tell that you didn't do a great job. And I think we gotta rate this thing now. I think we gotta rate it.
I agree. I will give it a 6.5. I think that it's got a lot of flaws, so there's room to grow, but at least I liked the family. And I will say, I think you're right that the Ted Cord thing is an issue only in universe because of how much I didn't really care about Jaime. That it's like, well, okay, now so I'm supposed to care about the other guy that does this.
Anyway, we're gonna shift focus away from him now.
Yeah,
right.
6.5 for me. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a 7. I'm being very generous with it because I'm like, this is a lot. It was a movie I expected not to be good, and I had so much more fun. And whenever that happens, I'm like, you got me there. You're getting the B. You're just getting a low B. So you're getting a soft B.
Meets expectations, does not exceed.
Exactly. I'm like,
this did not meet my expectations of at least wanting to care about Jaime Reyes.
Oh, I don't care about Jaime Reyes.
No, I'm saying this for me. I'm not saying that should be everyone's expectation.
Right.
I'm not about my expectation.
Oh, that's what your expectation was.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. My expectation was just to have a good time.
Yes.
And that's why I'm like 7. Yay.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen pretty hard people who I think give pretty hard critical things give this like an 8 and above. So like I think we're on the lower end, but just I don't know.
We're not out of the ballpark on the general meta on this, I feel. It's just the idea of I think nowadays, in order to have a very successful superhero movie, that element of what is this building to has to be a part of it too. Right. I hate that it is a part of that. I hate that it can't be self-contained for what it is, but it is something that knocks against it. When you do that, when you're just like, wait, does this have the ability to do that? What are you just, should this have been the Wolverine thing where it's like, oh, there was originally this plan set up, but I didn't want to commit to that. I'm like, that's good, for better or worse, a good decision in that. I'm like, that's why I'm like, was that a mistake? And I'm just like, I left the, I'm like, yeah, that was a mistake. That was definitely a mistake because they got people are saying Sudeikis for it.
No, they didn't. That's who the director wanted. That's why I was like, whatever. The decision might not be a studio decision because it sounds like the director really wanted to, in future movies, have Sudeikis play Blue Beetle, but he's like, I don't think they'd go for that. The studio, but yeah.
He's trying to be like, well, look what we did with Paul Rudd, though. That was Sudeikis.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you kept bringing up the mid-credit scene, and I'm like, I don't know, it's whatever. But I do think talking through this, it was a mistake in so much as now you're like, oh, next movie we'll talk about Ted, and it's like, why not end on something hopeful for Jaime?
Yeah,
like why not do like a Teen Titans reveal or something? Why would we do this?
Yeah, like why or just like why not just say nothing? And if you do get a second one, you have the room to do so much more and not commit to something. Now you're just being like, what if it was a good idea? I'm like, you could have easily put that in the sequel, in the trailer. That would have got people hooked if they wanted to come back for this. That would have been enough. Nope, you had to do it here and promise something you can't fulfill. Yeah, Gal Gadot.
I don't know if they can't fulfill this. It seems like
Well, the director doesn't have that decision making power. That's
no,
what I mean.
I'm
It's
not
like
talking
you
about
make
Sudeikis. I'm talking about just Ted Kord in general. I can see in a world where James Gunn is doing like all of these like F tier characters that he would bring a Ted Kord Blue Beetle who's higher up.
right. But what I'm saying is, why make the promise of a Blue Beetle 2 or a continuation of this story with that mid credit? That's what I'm saying is from a marketing business standpoint. Why just
again,
let this be what it is?
He's alive. I didn't see that as a continuation of the Jaime Reyes story. Just there is a Ted Kord still in the universe.
Right. I saw it differently. I'm like, oh, cool. This is the sequel that we're not going to get. That's fun. Let's talk about Black Adam 2 now, or Shazam 3. Let's do that too.
Yeah, the Black Adam thing was more a promise of a sequel, because then you're like,
Yeah.
oh, it's Superman versus that. But like
huge
just being like, oh,
implications.
Ted Kord's still alive is like, well, then he could show up in future movies. Doesn't necessarily mean he has to be in a sequel.
I
this.
guess that's fair if they ever were like, hey, we're going to go back in time and do a series, because James Gunn, that could be on brand for James Gunn. It's like, yeah, let's just not focus on this era and just do something perioded. I'm like, I could get behind that. But Blue Beetle,
Yeah,
had fun.
6.5 for me, 7 for you. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for listening, everybody. We're part of the That Shelf Podcast Network with other great shows like Bad Game Movies, Contra Zoom Pod, Springfield Googleplex. Sorry about that. So yeah, please go to thatshelf.com. You'll find those shows, our shows, and more shows. And if you want to hear older episodes of Spoiled Rotten, go to tdferything.com/spoiledrotten. We're on all the podcast platforms, so please rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends, follow, do all the stuff you need to do. And you can email us at spoiledpodcast@gmail.com. We are on Twitter, Threads, and Instagram at TDFSpoiled. Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.